Hello. Welcome to another episode of Season 16 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, the theme is B movies for C students. We're taking a break from the current trends toward elevated horror and examining the history of horror B movies and how they've developed over time. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Well, we did it.
Oh, man. Another one. She gone.
In the books.
Yep. This
is officially our last movie review of Season 16, which is titled B Movies for C Students. And the whole theme of this thing has been, we've got this big trend about elevated horror, and we think that's kind of a silly concept. So we're going back and watching B movies. And I have to say, this was a lot more interesting than I expected it to be, and I learned a lot more than I thought I would.
It definitely helped reset the palette too, man.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I've definitely learned a ton. There's so much more going into to these movies than what you expect, for sure.
Yeah, and just kind of the whole tradition around it and how it came to be and how we got to the point where we were, sort of the popular image that comes to mind now when you think about a horror B movie versus what a horror B movie really is now. It's kind of a cool story. So if this is your first time listening to one of our episodes, you've picked somewhat of an awkward starting point. But just hang in. I think it'll be fun.
You should just do what all the other listeners did, but in reverse. So you just go backwards.
Yeah, work your way backwards.
Time.
That would, Benjamin Button this. Mm-hmm. So, we have been doing two movies from every decade from the 1930s to the 2020s. This is our second movie of the 2020s, and it is the movie Deadstream from 2022. And I'm not going to lie, it is surprising to me that it took this long for us to get a movie called Deadstream.
I'm 100% with you on this.
It's such a slam dunk.
It was a very good name. Yeah.
It's too easy. Mm-hmm. Livestream has been part of popular vernacular for a very long time. Yeah. And I'm glad somebody finally came along and just knocked the ball off the tee on this one.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about kind of how B movies get made and how they get distributed and funded and everything else. And this is another movie that is a Shudder original. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that I didn't know what that meant. I had assumed up until now that meant Shudder funded it or hired someone to write it or at least bought the script and paid for it to be made. But I did some reading about it. And as it turns out, most Shudder originals are not produced by Shudder. They end up being purchased after the movie is shown at a festival or has some other hype around it. So it's really, I think the original just means that they have bought the distribution rights. And so a lot of times it'll only be available on Shudder or on other places where they've chosen to monetize it. So that was a little disappointing because I kind of thought they were actually going around funding these things.
Is that what they did with the movie we just watched last week?
I think so.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So, definitely. Because that one we talked about the festival where it was at.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. My bad.
So this one is kind of a similar story. And I think that's just kind of the world that we're in right now is the most recent developments are kind of overarching storyline changes in the development of B horror movies is that now, instead of being picked up from a festival by a big distributor to be put in theaters, they're often picked up from a festival by a big streaming service to be exclusive to that platform as a way to attract subscribers. So here we are, 2022.
Wonder which one pays more.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like the advertising cost is probably higher for the general theater release. Whereas like on the streaming thing, you've got kind of a captive network or a captive audience, so you can just recommend it to everyone. And but then like relative size on either one is pretty different. So I don't know. But anyway, got lots to talk about. First, I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the I'll never listen to cutting my fingers off by Turnover the same way again details. In 2022, Shudder brought us Deadstream, a found footage supernatural horror film about a live streamer who decides to broadcast himself spending the night in a haunted house. As the night goes on, he uncovers the secrets of the house's dark history and comes face to face with all of its ghosts. This movie was written, directed, produced, and edited by Joseph and Vanessa Winter. It had its world premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin, Texas, and became available for streaming on Shudder shortly after. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video, or watched on Shudder, or if your wife started a free trial of AMC Plus and then didn't cancel it before the first billing period, and also didn't cancel it after you brought it up to her last week, you can watch it there too.
It's perfect. That was one of the reasons for picking this movie, was because I saw it was on AMC Plus, and I knew
and you
it was going to
assumed
happen.
that I would still be, yep.
So when I text you, I said it was rental or AMC Plus. That's what I put in the text.
Yep.
Yeah.
You accurately assessed the situation, my friend.
I thought to myself, what would you do in this situation? Exactly what she did. So I was like, I'm going to text him.
You're like, how can I troll him effectively? This will work. And it did. So, yeah.
Perfect.
But yeah, this one I can honestly say was unlike any other horror movie I've watched before, in that I'd never seen one that was sort of framed as like a live cast or like starring a YouTuber and sort of posing as a YouTube type series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the closest thing I could think of was one of the Paranormal Activities. I think they had like it wasn't like around that specifically. It used more like robocalling or WebEx callings or whatever you call them, Zoom calls. The other one was there's like a section in I think VHS or VHS2, and like it consists of like it's just like a call on the computer, but I don't recall seeing one like this specifically like set out how this one is at all. It was kind of interesting.
Interesting. I may be remembering it wrong, but I think the husband and wife duo that made this one also did a segment of one of the VHS movies, but I could be confusing this with another one. So I'm curious. It might be the same
we'll
one.
Have to look it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was also that movie Unfriended that was kind of all like,
oh, that's right. Yeah.
Laptop chat type stuff. But yeah, this one, especially
this was
after
a live streamer doing it in live only, like no other cameras. Which also the kind of getting the feedback from the audience as he goes along. Like, it occurred to me that this one would be really confusing, I think, for anyone to watch like in the 90s or before. Like this is really like of the time in that it relies on a lot of technology that just didn't exist in the past. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to think about, but it's absolutely accurate.
And it was also because of that, it felt like kind of a new twist on the found footage genre that we both like.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons why I picked this film, honestly, was it was found footage, and after reading like what it was supposed to be about, I was like, this could be something like we hadn't seen before. I mean, I definitely thoroughly enjoy found footage, and then this one kind of came up, plus it's a dope name.
Yeah. And I think that the format really allowed him to do some kind of interesting stuff. Like he was playing videos from other paranormal encounters in the house, and then like holding his tablet up sort of in the same place where it had happened and then lowering it. So you had kind of that anticipation of, I'm seeing a video of a thing happening there, and then slowly the tablet is moving down and you're expecting to see it. Like, will it be there? Will it not be there? And there were just some cool kind of editing type things that were done that I think made it found footage, but also had a way of believably integrating more footage from other experiences within the same house.
Yeah. And, while doing that, like the actual character itself, like that's for sure. Like I've seen live streamers be just as obnoxious as him. Like, right. So it was like accurately like portrayed too, because they act, not all, but a lot of them act that way. But the other side of it was, how can you make this not be just us watching this guy or this house the whole time? Let's insert some video. And pretty intelligent stuff in my opinion. Like I thought that was pretty smart to add to the story, because otherwise it would have been brutal. Very brutal.
Yeah, I think that for this one to work, it had to not take itself too seriously for a lot of it. And so there were a lot of jokes being made just about sort of like YouTuber live streamer culture in general, some of which I didn't really like resonate with, because that's just not a thing that I watch very much, but I'm at least familiar enough to kind of get most of the jokes. And there were some things too that were just pretty funny, like his wheel of stupid things. I thought was just like creative, right? I mean, but I could totally see somebody doing that as a way of trying to be entertaining in this scenario when they think nothing might actually happen.
Yeah. See, I'm kind of the opposite. So I have, like, my main streaming thing that I use is YouTube. So I watch a lot, like how-to videos and things like that. And so you do see, I'll see certain videos and things like this. So what he was doing was extremely familiar for me. And in fact, I actually kind of think that I kind of wish, I thought that they could have pulled this off and been just straight horror a little bit better than they pulled off it being a horror comedy. Just personally, because I get so engulfed with found footage, like watching it, just being in the zone, watching it from their eyes, that I was like, man, there were a couple of these scenes that were actually like pretty intense. But then he would kind of do something maybe kind of stupid, or not all the time, but just some of the things he would do, you just kind of got a little annoyed, and you're like, yeah, this is a comedy horror. When I picked it, I didn't realize it was comedy horror. I thought it was just horror, so I wasn't prepared for it either, just to be clear. But I thoroughly enjoyed the concept of it, though, like the fact that you had different camera angles, one on his head, the other one, facing him, and in different rooms and everything. Like, I thought the whole setup was pretty intense and pretty cool. But there were just like added pieces that you're just like, like throwing your spark plugs at the beginning was like, okay, that's funny. Like you knew what you're getting yourselves into. But still.
Yeah, I think that it could definitely take you out of the moment with some of the stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that this movie was very capable of delivering on like a good, scary scene.
Yeah.
And it kind of had all the hallmarks of a lower budget movie, in that like it looked good, because anything should look good in the 2020s because camera technology is so good. Yeah. And the editing was good and everything. But also it was like just a couple of characters. It was in a very, very small physical area. They basically just in and around this one house the whole time. And then a lot of the additional interaction, or like they found a lot of ways to add more stuff going on. So even though it was just him alone in the house, he was like constantly interacting with all the people who were in the audience and like leaving the comments and stuff. And so even if things were like a little bit slower in the movie, it was like there was always something extra going on, whether that was you're reading the comments that are coming in. And some of them were actually pretty funny. Like one of them said, Sean thinks he's a final girl. And I thought that was really funny, like at the point that happened in the movie.
Yeah.
But then there are things where like, I guess it was when he goes back into the house after he'd gone out and been in the car for a while. Yeah. And he's like making the weapons, and then he's about to go upstairs and have the big confrontation. You see a pair of legs pulling themselves up through a hole in the ceiling behind him. And that was just so creepy. And I felt like just because of the way they did the cameras and stuff, you were kind of always like not able to see exactly what you wanted to, which just meant you assume something terrible was happening on the other side. And so I think that the multiple camera angles as well were really good because it was kind of flipping back and forth, and you were never really able to like focus in on any one thing. You kind of had to be on your toes the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it the Haunting of Hill House like effect.
Yeah.
Where like anytime I see like a movie like this, like I think that, and being that it was found footage, like when I was saying like I was engulfed, that's why, you know, like I'm trying to see like if they add anything extra. Like halfway through, maybe like two-thirds through, I had the thought like I should have been like pausing to read more of those messages when they were popping up. But because I watch, you know, live streamers and things like that, I just kind of ignored it because that's what I do.
You just learned to tune it out.
Yeah. And so like, but you know, I saw, you know, a couple comments on there that had kind of laughing, but the other thing with the cameras, you know, like you were just talking with the camera angle and how the other thing with it was having the camera on the bad guy at the end, like the usage of the cameras for this being GoPros. If I don't know if that's what it was actually filmed on, if it was, that's brilliant. But just the usage of that, and then you think like this is written by like a couple. There's like maybe like 3 or 4 people in the film. It's revolving around a house, like so small set, small cast, had to be small budget. Like this is like B movie. And also, even though they had all that, they were doing things that were actually pretty funny, actually pretty innovative, putting, you know, camera on. It was innovative to an extent. Like, this is definitely like an Evil Dead fan-made movie. Like, there's no way I could see otherwise. Like, just some of the comedy aspects of it. But yeah, it's just because it's B movie and 2022 when this came out, like there's a lot of innovative things that I thought were happening. I'm not saying the movie was perfect. In the first 5 minutes, I almost had a panic attack because I thought that that's how the movie was going to be, where it was like you're watching a YouTube video only.
Yeah, like really leaning into
it. I for the first time, like, had my phone out to text you, I am so sorry. Like, legitimately, it was like, shit, I can't believe I just made, because I knew you don't normally watch those things. I could have made it through, but I was like, I can't believe I just did this to him. And I'm like, what can I say to be funny about it? It's like, this is what you get for not watching musicals or so, you know, something like that. And I was like, God, gee, this is just a dick move, man. And then it got better, and I was like, okay, we're good. But that first bit, like, if you make it through that, like, you know, it's not too awful.
Yeah, and I was a little sus at the beginning, but I was also intrigued because I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm getting into here.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
You know, and it got into like what it was going to be pretty quickly, so that helped. But back to your point about like a small number of actors and like a small location and stuff, the Wikipedia page only lists 3 people under the cast, but I think it had to be a little bit more than that from some of the other videos that got shown, just because there was like the younger girl in one of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think. See, it was so legit. I did not even think that they were part of it.
Oh yeah. So, you know, it was just, but it was small. I feel like the thing that we come back to over and over again is that the best horror movies understand their own capabilities and operate within them. So it's like, if you can't pull off like a big, crazy looking, scary monster, don't show one.
Right.
If you can't pull off the special effects that you're trying to pull off, just don't do them. Like, do the stuff that you know you can do well and use that as the boundaries for like how to make the movie. And if you can figure out how to make a good, compelling thing without getting outside of the stuff that you know you can pull off, that's how you like do it, especially on like a smaller budget or a more DIY type thing. And I feel like this one did a good job of that. Like, I feel like the story was pretty convoluted, and I still can't explain kind of like the logical jumps between certain parts of it.
Yep.
But it was still a good, like, engrossing, kept my attention horror movie with some really like scary horror scenes.
Yeah, it was the most, and this could probably sound worse than what I intend, but like it was the most hot and cold movie that I think I've watched, where like some of the times when he was doing the whole YouTube sorry so like some of the time when he was doing the whole YouTuber thing, where like his reactions were like over the top and like his voice was kind of like childish and like kind of annoying, that kind of got to me some of the times. But then there were legit actual scenes in here that frightened the hell out of me. I mean, the just the very beginning when the roof, they bang on the roof, when he's right there, it was actually kind of funny, his reaction, because he just took off. It's like, yes, sir, that's what you're supposed to do. But like that, that was legit pretty intense. And I think so. I was watching this in the middle of the night, and Kate came out to get like a bottle for my son or something, and I paused the movie and I was like, this is an intense, like, I can't remember the exact wording, but I was like, this is actually like pretty sketchy little film we're watching here, Kate. And I told her what it was, and then at that point, like, I knew it was kind of comedy at the beginning. It was too early to be fully engrossed into it to know it was more of a comedy, but at one time I was like, holy cow, let me lock my doors real quick. Let me make sure that we're safe here. And I didn't think the special effects were that bad either. I mean,
I think they used them appropriately. I think that if you had like lots of really long close-ups on some of the monsters, it would have hurt it a little bit. But just the stuff in the background, stuff you can't see, I think they did a good job of managing within what they were able to do.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, and they really pulled off some cool stuff where like the jerky camera or not being able to fully see a thing worked to their favor and was also kind of believable in the context of what was happening. And I think a really, really good example of that was the spear cam.
The spear cam, dude.
Where he like takes the stab at the corner man that you can't even see, but like there's so much anticipation building up to that. And then just immediately corner man takes the spear from him and then stabs him with it. And you like see the knife going into him from the camera. And I was just like, holy crap, what is happening? I mean, that was crazy intense. And you didn't even see the monster,
Yeah. It was almost like Vertigo or something. Like I was like, it was like reverse like art kind of thing, like where you're like, you have to depress this area to get the art to that's the spear cam was the one where I was like, that's a fun idea that they're doing there, and then leaves it in them and you could watch them get up and go, and it was like, that's smart too, like you have a camera on the person, make sure that they stay down. It was. I think at that point I was just like, "What a movie, man! What a movie! What a time to be alive!" But
and I think that it kept pace pretty well. There was definitely a big change when it went from being like you're just hearing things thump or like footsteps to all of a sudden you're actually seeing like evil entities. It was an abrupt enough change that it took me by surprise.
Yeah. And I thought, I think that, so I guess it would be after the girl joins in and she's part of it, when she turns finally, like from then on, but like for an hour and 30 minutes, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it felt like it took forever to get there, but it also didn't feel like, it felt like it was appropriate for the time that it started. Maybe a little bit earlier than normal too, because we had a lot of action after that, and maybe just like it was longer. But make no mistake, and you mentioned it, like, I can't tell you necessarily the point of this movie. Like,
right.
I mean, I honestly can't. but I'm gonna watch it again. You know, like that's kind of how I specifically feel. It's like I don't know necessarily what I know the premise. Like he's going, I know what he's doing. I can't tell you the meat and bones of it. You know, but so seriously, this movie's like a confused boner. Anyways, just kidding. Sorry. I think the thing I thought that was kind of we talked about like adding the video earlier and like how it actually. I mean, it's like watching Blair Witch and them doing the interviews with the townsfolk. But the thing I thought that was kind of cool too was like he was getting like updated information the whole time from them.
Yes.
There's three things that tells me that this isn't this just wouldn't happen in real life. One, he was getting actual answers. I feel like most of the time you kind of get a little bit of troll responses sometimes.
Yeah.
Second, no one like called the cops or did something to him being at the house in general. Like someone would have called the cops or swatted him, done something to that effect. And what was my third one? I'm going to stick to my original thing. Those were the two reasons why. Oh, no. The third one was when it flipped and you were looking from his angle so he had a camera on his head and camera looking at him. When you were looking from his head camera straight, it wasn't bouncy. It not all the time. Like when he was showing like you tape, have duct tape, that always comes in handy, which when he's looking at that, it was too still, for what he was doing. It's like, no, your head can't say that. But that brings me up to another point that I really loved, which was I didn't notice if he did this early on, but I noticed. So he hurts his leg when he jumps out of the house and it's cut. And earlier in the film, he's talking about how you always have duct tape. It's always good to have. I don't remember if he does it in this movie, but I noticed later on in the film, if you looked at his leg, it's duct taped. And
yes.
And it just maybe because I missed it and then I caught it later on, I was just like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That he did that. And now that I think about it, he did that in the car, didn't he? Didn't he duct tape his leg? Yeah, son of a bee. I totally forgot though. And I mean, sometimes it's just better to live in my world, because I was legit cracking
You're
up.
just enjoying it. Yeah.
I was like, that's brilliant. It'd be brilliant to not mention it and have it duct tape.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that one from a few weeks ago when the girl was like the body was decaying. And so then she shows up with like all of her weapons and duct tape. And she's just like putting herself back together. Mm-hmm. Duct tape's a big plot device in the 2010s and 20s, apparently.
Something we're all familiar with.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. Like you said, I had kind of an initial negative reaction when it first started because I was just like, oh, one of these. But then it came around for sure. And I think there were several good scenes. Even aside from the one I mentioned earlier, the one where he like wakes up in the bathtub and was like possessed or whatever, like that was just super creepy and there was no explanation for what it was or what was about to happen. And there were a lot of those types of moments in this one that just made it really, really attention keeping, which I feel like a lot of times when you're working on a smaller budget, you're working with less experienced directors and people and writers and stuff like that. You don't have as good a time maintaining like an overall entertaining viewing experience. And I was pleasantly surprised. It was good.
Yeah, I think first off, I was under a lot of pressure picking this one because we all know the last few picks have been boners. Let's just admit it. It's not been that great. And then it starts out a little rough, and I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm questioning everything. And then...
Have I lost it?
Yes. And then I was like, okay, we did okay on this one.
So you feel like you got your groove back?
I don't know if I got necessarily the whole groove back because I should have been having, home runs this whole time because this is what I love. But, I was definitely like... I can't get it up for this now, and they don't make a pill for it. God, I gotta get this out of my head. Anyway,
you gotta go see a doctor about that. Else it'll keep coming back.
Could you pick up something for me in Mexico City?
Absolutely, I will.
But it's definitely like questioning it. And then as I was watching it, it was going. It's like, okay, this isn't nearly. I actually came to the decision, like, even if Daniel isn't happy with it, I'm not too upset with this. We've definitely watched worse, and it was better than my last couple picks. So I was like, okay. And the other thing too, I was kind of concerned with was like, now that we're time's going by, it's like, man, like, are we gonna lose? Like, are we gonna lose the? I'm gonna say quality of B movies, but like I'm thinking like 70s, 80s style, where like now we have such clear, good edited films, but it's just terrible. Like it's just not. It's hard to watch sometimes. Maybe they thought that with the 70s, 80s, but I just really thought this would be changed by now, or we might be losing it. But it's like, okay, there's still options,
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing you and I have always really liked about horror movies, and maybe less Hollywood horror movies, which is kind of where B movies fall, is just the creativity of it. We're going to do a totally different take on a thing and have a bunch of creative ideas to try and make you feel the things you want to feel from a horror movie and be entertained by it. And I think this one did a good job of it. So I think it was a great pick, and I think you shouldn't be down on yourself.
You guys can't see me right now, but I'm doing the thing where you hold your hands together and you bounce them on either side of your head like you're celebrating. I'm doing that right now.
Like raising the roof?
Kind of, but no.
Oh man, this has been a fun one.
It's been really fun. What comes in next episode?
Well, next episode is going to be our recap of season 16.
That's right.
And we, like I mentioned in the beginning, we learned a lot about the history of B horror movies, which is way more interesting and eventful than I was expecting. And so we're going to come back and just kind of walk through that progression all in one sort of short, cohesive episode. And we'll talk about some of the movies and some of the surprises and stuff we had along the way. And then maybe give a little hint about what season 17 is going to be like.
Yeah, I'll admit, when you told me B movies for C students, I was like, this is great. I didn't realize I was going to learn as much. I thought we were just going to be watching B movies only the whole time. And then we started learning, and I was like, well, this is cool too, I guess.
Didn't sign up for this.
I don't want to fucking learn, nerds. Anyways, thanks for listening. I was kidding. Shit.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com. Or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
No, man. STDs can go away. You should go get that checked out for sure.